Welcome. Hello, everyone. Hi. So good to see everyone streaming in from the waiting room. Welcome, welcome. Lovely to see all your smiling faces on this Monday. Um, I will get started and mention a couple housekeeping items before we dive into the program for today. My name is Andrea. I'm with the Parkinson and Movement Disorder Alliance, and we're thrilled to be hosting you. Um, for today's program, you're going to be muted. Your line of communication will be the chat. So if anyone has been living under a rock and not Zooming 4 times a day, if you hover your mouse over the screen, a bottom bar, a menu bar will pop up, and you can click chat and type in your message. I always like to have us all practice doing that. If you click chat and then go ahead and type in where you're joining us from, it's a great way for us to know where everyone is. So there we go. You're the first one, Dave, from Northwest Pennsylvania. Good to see you joining us. And John and Marilyn from Atlanta, welcome. So now that you all know how to ask questions and make comments in the chat, let's see. The other thing I'll share, there's 2 ways to view the program today. In the upper right-hand corner, you can click either speaker mode or gallery, and then you can either see all of the boxes, Brady Bunch style, or just the speaker large. So when we start with the slides, I recommend switching to speakers so you'll be able to see all that content. All right, well, I think that's all the housekeeping that I have to share. So I will go ahead and turn it over to our facilitator, Dr. Indu Subramanian, to tell us a little bit about what we're going to be learning about today and who our guest is. So take it away, Indu.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for continuing to socially connect this way while we're still physically disconnected. Hopefully we're getting closer to being able to see each other. I saw the CDC had changed their regulations a little bit with people being able to visit their grandchildren if they've been vaccinated and stuff. So I think some slow progress, but we continue to try to stay safe and hope that everyone's getting vaccinated out there, and excited to see you all here. So it's exciting to have Jonny Acheson, Dr. Atchison, join us from the UK. He's an amazing person. He's got, not only does he have a person living with Parkinson's, but he also is a physician. He works in the ER. He's originally from Londonderry in Ireland and is currently based in Leicester. He went to the University of Belfast for medical school and is an emergency room doctor. I know he's been working through the pandemic, and we thank you for your service as a frontline worker. That's amazing, and so needed and important work. So we really appreciate that. But we also have learned that Jonny is an amazing artist. He has used art and has illustrated a lot of interesting symptoms. And I was introduced to him through Dr. Mike Oken, who we've been sharing a blog space, and we've been using some of Jonny's work to illustrate some of our blogs. So we'll point you in that direction to look at the blogs. And Jonny's put together a really cute video. I got a sneak peek at that, and we'll learn a little bit about his story and kind of, I guess we don't need too much of an introduction, right? Because you're going to kind of tell us a little bit about it through the I guess the video kind of narration, right? Is that sort of our plan, or through the slides and stuff like that? But maybe we could just have you say hello and give us a quick update on kind of the COVID situation in the UK right now.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to listen to this this talk this evening. So yeah, I'm Jonny Acheson. I'm an emergency medicine doctor in Leicester, and I was diagnosed with Parkinson's back in 2016 when I was 41 years of age. COVID-wise, for me, I worked from home from March until sort of mid-May, and then I decided really to go back to work, and I've been working in the emergency room since then. Thankfully for us, the second peak is now reduced right down, and things are getting a bit back to normal. The kids went back to school today for the first time. and that's absolutely brilliant. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at in the UK. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's also, I forgot to mention, International Women's Day. So happy International Women's Day to everyone. And we salute the many women that are even with the PMD Alliance working hard here to bring you this program and all the great work that they do as well. So yeah, without further ado, maybe Jonny, do you want to share your slides and your presentation? And then we can have sort of more of a chat and make it more discussant, get just Q&A at the end.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll just brilliant. Okay, can everybody see the slide yet?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. So today I'm going to share with you my perspective of living and working with Parkinson's as I try to balance both, and how I try to live as well as I can every day, not always successfully. But I'll be doing this, as Indu said, by using a series of sketches that I've drawn. So my story, the diagnosis really was similar to many others before me, and for those who are still to come. I was sitting in the Leicester Medical School typing one day, and there was this faintest flicker in my left little finger. It was slight, but it was there. I also noticed that my typing had become slower, and I think in general doctors aren't the best typers anyway. But even by those low standards, this was slow, one finger on both hands type of an effort. And I would fall asleep in the evenings before my 10 and 6-year-old went to bed. I fell asleep at the noisiest swimming gala you could ever imagine. I fell asleep at Leicester City Football Club or Soccer Club amongst 32,000 fans loudly singing Jamie Vardy's having a party. He's their best player. I thought I was just tired, stressed, working too hard, burning the candle at both ends, leaving the hospital at 3:30 in the morning after a busy shift and hoping not to be phoned again that night. But I kept tripping. I would scuff my left foot when I was walking as if it hit the curb. And when I looked around, it was totally flat. It happened time and time again. It happened more often if I've been walking for a prolonged period of time or if I was tired. One night, one of my friends came into our house with his daughter, and he said he'd just taken her to Bollywood dancing lessons. So he jumped up and he said, I'll teach you how to change the light bulb dance. So we all stood up, including my daughter, and we had great fun, except that I noticed that I couldn't rotate my left wrist very quickly. And that continued to bother me over the next few days. I would look at it and I would tell my brain, come on, move it faster. But I just couldn't. When I told my wife, she wanted me to go to the doctor the next day when we were supposed to be going to London on holidays. I said I wouldn't get an appointment anyway, so we went to London. A combination of tripping and sleeping and tripping and sleeping meant we had to come home a day early, and down to the GP it was. When I was seen in the neurology clinic the next day, I was asked to walk from one end of the clinic to the other. Determined not to scuff my foot, I concentrated hard and managed it without tripping. Maybe it'll be okay, I thought when I sat down. You don't swing your left arm much, the doctor said. I hadn't noticed. No one had. Why would you? The neurologist leaned across and said, Jonny, you need a DAT scan. Now, don't get me wrong, I did pay attention in medical school, but I do not remember anything about what a DAT scan was. My wife, who's an old age psychiatrist, then knew what the diagnosis was, as she routinely ordered DAT scans in her memory clinics. She simply said to the neurologist, he doesn't know what that is. I'm really sorry to tell you, but you've got idiopathic Parkinson's disease, the neurologist said. It was numbing, like someone had pressed the pause button on my life. So we went home and we sat around the dinner table. The kids knew that things were not the way they should be at home. And we decided to tell them what was happening. But how do you tell a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old? I just said that Dad doesn't have enough chemical in the part of his brain that helps him move and be himself. My son wanted to know if I would always be the same, and my daughters wanted to know if the doctors would be able to fix it. Over the past few years, we've always had an open book policy, any question, any time, excluding after 10:30 at night, when my son usually asks, "Dad, have you locked up? I'm just checking." So if you're going to leave the house unlocked once, make sure it's not your children that discover it the next morning. So after the initial shock and learning and reading a lot of information, I realized that I'd been given a blank canvas, so to speak, with reasonable adjustments and work put in place, including a fixed 8 to 6 working pattern, with no evenings and no on-calls, with no phone calls throughout the night anymore. Life suddenly looked organized. So what was the first thing that Parkinson's has taught me? It was time to focus and really look at the priorities and really what was important in life. It wasn't being an associate professor in medical education at the Leicester Medical School. It wasn't winning a National Educational Award in 2016. It was realizing that you had to live the best that you could every day. Parkinson's wasn't going to go away, but how could you keep it at bay? How could you keep your dopamine levels as high as possible? So, is there light at the end of the tunnel? What has it been like living with Parkinson's on a day-by-day basis for me over the past 5 years? What have I observed? What have my family and friends seen? And what have we learned together? I think the best way to describe it is like this. I think that having Parkinson's disease is like being a weeble. Fragile at times, but with good support around you, even if you become off balance, they will guide you back to where you were. And that's the second thing that Parkinson's has taught me, that having a well-defined care circle is key. So who's in mine? Well, it's my wife, my kids, some of my wider family, my neurologist, my Parkinson's nurse, my physio team, my speech and language team, my 2 best mates, my work colleagues, my gym trainer, a few people with Parkinson's, and my soon-to-be bought dog. In August 2020, I sent a tweet out looking for healthcare professionals who were living and working with Parkinson's, asking them if they wanted to join a support group. You see, this disease brings people together who otherwise would never meet from all walks of life. But what's great about the group is that we understand how healthcare works. We understand the system we're all working in, its challenges and its frustrations. And that's been a great support. There are 15 of us now throughout the UK and Ireland. We have a weekly WhatsApp group where somebody poses a question every week, which we then discuss. And then we have a monthly online meeting. So what do I do personally as I try to live as best as I can with Parkinson's every day? Well, for the first 4 weeks, to be honest, I was in a grief reaction. I couldn't really focus on much, just sitting at home. But then I honed in on 2 things when I was reading. Number 1, this disease isn't going to kill me. Well, not directly anyway. And number 2, 2.5 hours of high intensity exercise every week may slow progression. So I joined the university gym and I sat down with one of the trainers and worked out a program that's got adapted every 3 months over the past 4.5 years. I'm now fitter than I've ever been. However, I'm not superhuman. I'm finding that my motivation to exercise has waned somewhat over the past 6 months. Although I'm still doing 2.5 hours of exercise a week, it can be a struggle sometimes. I found going over 2.5 hours or 150 minutes just makes me more tired at certain points of the day. And I was finding exercise in the morning more challenging. But recent attendance at PD Pacific exercise classes online has helped. In 2018, I took on a 20-mile bike ride when I pedaled for Parkinson's. In 2019, I played football for Parkinson's when the UK young onset Parkinson's football team went to Copenhagen to play in the European Parkinson's Disease Soccer Championships. We did in England. We won the group undefeated, and then we got knocked out in the semi-finals, except it didn't go to penalties. And then last summer, I put pressure on my knees for Parkinson's when I did 5,000 knee-ups in my garden. So exercise really does light your brain up like a Christmas tree, and you feel so much better when you do it. But yes, it has helped, but at what cost? I was getting up early, I was taking my medication at 6 in the morning, and then I was in the gym at 6:30. Well, that was until COVID hit. So our family breakfast time was sacrificed, except on a Thursday and the weekend. So how I've adapted during COVID? Well, a friend gave me a turbo trainer, which I attached to my road bike in my garage. I was trying to cycle for 20 to 30 minutes every day and then going on a longer cycle every other Sunday morning. I also do stretching, weights and balance exercises. And presently I'm just working out a new regime to incorporate the online exercise classes. So I think the third thing that Parkinson's has taught me that it really wants to isolate, and it wants you to not do the things that you should be doing to help. So with that in mind, it's about keeping busy. I think it's about always having something in the diary, something to always look forward to, keeping yourself social when you don't want to be. It's also about maximizing your medication. If your honeymoon period has ended and you're experiencing motor fluctuations, keeping yourself hydrated is key. The days I have a higher fluid intake are the days when I have a better chance of having a good day. But it's not about just about oral fluids. It's about eating as healthily as you can and keeping your bowels moving to maximize the levodopa absorption. I tend to leave all my main protein intake in my diet to the evening time, so my levodopa absorption isn't slowed down. The fourth thing Parkinson's has taught me is to embrace new things. For me, it was also about finding new interests, a hobby, something I could focus on and enjoy doing, something that would hold my concentration for a prolonged period of time. About 2 years after I was diagnosed, I picked up an A5 sketch pad, some India ink pens, and started to tell the story of the diagnosis through the eyes of my daughter, because she kept coming out with the most wonderful phrases. One day, for example, I was particularly symptomatic and kept walking into the door frames at home, hitting my left shoulder repeatedly because I was misjudging. When she went up to her room to go to bed that night, she walked straight into the door frame as well, hitting her left shoulder. "Why did you do that?" I said. "To make you feel better," she replied. Another time she said, "Dad, what caused your Parkinson's?" "No one knows," I said. "Would you not think somebody should find out?" she replied. But my favorite quote was this. There was one night I was taking her to Girls Brigade, which is a church group for young girls. I was sitting on the bottom of the stairs and said, hurry up, we need to go, we need to get into the car." So with my keys in my hand, trembling, and attempting to put my shoe on when grabbing my bag and finishing my coffee, my daughter, saying that this was stressing me and was making me symptomatic, said, "It's okay, Dad, we've got time, we'll be fine, there's no rush." So from there on, I started to sketch the symptoms, a selection of which you will see during the talk. I basically take the symptom, I draw a cartoon to help people understand what it feels like, and then add a strapline. And I think you need the three together to make it work. In 2019, this culminated in an art exhibition called Parkinson's Portrayed, which consists of 32 sketches depicting the motor and non-motor symptoms of Parkinson's. It's been displayed at the Leicester Hospital and also in the Leicester Medical School. It's presently in the East Surrey Hospital in England, and it's going to another hospital in 2021. So the aim really is to have it displayed in 10 hospitals and 10 medical schools post-COVID. But it's not only black and white sketches that I've drawn. I've also introduced some colour with these pink and blue Parkinson's brains. And I've also tried to use Lego to try to educate around the complexity of the disease. This was really, the picture on the left was on the back of an in-flight magazine that was on a flight. We were flying back from Belfast to England not this New Year's Eve, the New Year's Eve before. One of my kids went, "Dad, that's just like you. They're very stiff. They don't move their arms much, and they don't really smile a lot." So that was interesting. So I did a male and a female version, but it's not just Parkinson's that I draw. So we have a Royal College of Emergency Medicine in London, and this year I drew their charity calendar for them. This is an example of one of the sketches. It's a bit medical, but you'll get the concept. Basically, children aren't little adults. You apply the same principles of resuscitation to a adult or to a child that you do in an adult, but they are slightly different. So obviously the adults ABCDE assessment is capital letters, and the children's is a smaller one. So so that's been very useful to do. So over time, I've found over the past sort of year or so that, you know, just drawing about Parkinson's and emergency medicine wasn't healthy, because I was living with one and working with the other. So I really needed to find a different avenue. So I started to draw animals using the shapes of their names and people's pets. So so this is an example of one. So this is Draft, obviously. So that's been quite fun to do. And then when people get me to do their pets, these are two cats. This is Ruby and Steve. This is one of my favorites. So so artwork really has been good for me, and I think it's been good for my Parkinson's. So family life, I think the most challenging part of Parkinson's is the impact on the family. The non-motor symptoms that are invisible to people who don't carefully look for them, but that's not the same for the family, because they see them. They aren't invisible to them, and the family take the brunt of what Parkinson's does. So for example, over the first 4 years, my medication was working great. My arm started to swing again, and I pretty much felt normal. But over time, the Stalevo tablets, which worked for 6 hours initially, now work for about 2.5. There's a strong history of dependence in my family, so not going above 6 milligrams of a dopamine agonist in the future seems sensible. But as a result, over the past year, I was wearing off a reasonable amount, sort of 30 to 45 minutes before every dose. However, I started some slow-release Matapar in September, and that's made a great difference to smoothing out the dopamine levels for the time being. But that was hard for my wife and kids to understand. You know, how do you explain wearing off to people? In the summer, when I was taking my medication early, my daughter noticed and she said, "Dad, do you need to switch back on again?" My son asks me routinely now if I'm off, and the telltale sign is that I start to yawn. Don't know if anybody else experiences that, but I'll start to yawn when I'm going off. So for me, no yawning is good dopamine levels. Yawning means my dopamine levels are dropping. And I get anxious. I get anxious about the strangest things, like picking a Premier League fantasy football team, to not being able to make a decision in fear of making the wrong one. My kids are funny. They just say, "Deep breath, Dad, trust the process." Sometimes I get the feeling that I'm getting overwhelmed with too much to do and too much on. And I've learned to deal with this by just pulling back a little and reduce the amount that's going on. I've implemented a structure recently that I only have 3 projects on the go at once. So if another one is to be added, then one of the other 3 need to be finished before I can add another one to the list. So once this talk's finished tonight, I'll add something else on, and that'll get me back to 3 again. But I also started to realize my mood would dip, and at times I would want to withdraw. I wanted to be in my own bubble, especially if I hadn't been exercising for a few days. And I've never been diagnosed with clinical depression, but it must be a very difficult place to be. But for me, sleep is a big issue. I'm fine getting over. I'm interrupted during the night. I usually don't get past 5:30 in the morning. I can't lie in bed, and I usually get up, although this is better with the new exercise regime. The kids realize that it's not a burglar now, it's just me. I've tried to have a consistent approach: no coffee after 1 o'clock, although I drink decaf, no screen time before you go to bed, emptying my bladder, try to switch off, but this has become more difficult recently. I think the days when you wake up tired because of lack of sleep, I think personally it gives you an insight into how your symptoms will be in a few years. That's been my experience anyway. I think when you're tired, you naturally become more anxious. And I think that compulsivity is also exacerbated on the days you have a major sleep deficit. So the 5th thing I've learned about Parkinson's is not to beat yourself up, bury the bad days and bank the good ones. So although COVID has been challenging for our family and for all families, I think what it's taught us is how to spend quality time with one another. And the one thing we've started to do together as a family is exercise, and that's been great fun. But I do think it's about pacing yourself, reducing the stress down so you don't burn up all your dopamine. Stress, I have to say, is the biggest dopamine burner there is. I try not to adrenalize myself, because adrenaline, getting a bit medical here, but adrenaline is made from noradrenaline, which is made from dopamine, which we don't have a lot of. So the sick thing I've learned that you need to do is keep your emotions in check. That's true for me, and that's good advice for anybody. And I think that concept has been adapted into my work, as I was finding that just zapping my dopamine, a major trauma call or reducing a dislocated ankle under sedation, caused my symptoms to become much worse. I found myself exhausted and needing to sit down for 15 or 20 minutes after a case like that. And we don't have time to sit down for 15 minutes after every case. So the moral of the story was, if you're going to pick one specialty to work in with Parkinson's, don't pick emergency medicine. But my trusts have been excellent, and that's helped me to stay in work for the past 4.5 years. I'm dually trained in emergency medicine and pediatric emergency medicine, so children's, but had to give up my children's specialty shortly after diagnosis, because I found that when children were crying loudly and upset, I would get very symptomatic. This was particularly difficult when you were trying to insert a needle into the child and they were screaming as your trembling hand was coming towards them, and their parents just looked shocked. So just over 2 years ago, I moved to work in our emergency decisions unit, which is a 12-bedded unit and 4-chaired area. It's part of the emergency room department, and patients are admitted for observation, so a decision can be made about whether they're discharged within 24 hours. I look after this unit 2 days a week. It's much easier as the pressure is less. The patients are not as sick. There's no time pressure to get the ward round finished. So if it takes me 2 hours or 4 hours, it doesn't matter. If I need to go and sit down halfway through and get a cup of coffee, that's fine as well. Up to September last year, I worked in the Leicester Medical School 2 days a week and was responsible for preparing and setting all the clinical practical exams to ensure that they were reaching the standard to become doctors. But I found that running 2 diaries was getting too complicated, so I've now concentrated all my time into the trust. I still work for the General Medical Council in London on a consultancy basis, and I reduced my hours down in September from 48 to 40 hours a week. I recently read that the average time a person with Parkinson's stays in work is 4.2 years. I was pleased to pass this figure recently, and the recent reduction in hours and change in my job plan hopefully will keep me in work longer. So apart from the challenge of adrenaline, what other ways does Parkinson's affect my work? Well, I can be a bit apathetic occasionally. Some days are more productive than others. I'm easily distracted, but I've addressed this by taking on more administration roles in the emergency room, where the work comes in on a Monday and needs to be done by Friday, so that keeps me to task. I also worried about being slightly facially masked at times in work and wondered how the patients and my colleagues would react to that. As I do most of my clinical work in the mornings, I'm usually on, so it's not an issue. When I was sitting in the weekly consultant meetings, I was usually off and masked. However, when I looked around the room, I just blended in as nobody else was showing much emotion either. And at times I have a difficulty multitasking, finding the right words, my thinking slows down. If this happens clinically, I just take my time and use it as a teaching opportunity on the ward round. I just say, tell me what you would do in this situation, hoping that somebody will jog my memory and buy me a bit of time. It usually works. But everybody in the ED knows that everybody in the ED knows the diagnosis. For the first 2 years, it was just my consultant colleagues. Then I had to tell the senior nurses, and now everybody does. You just need to look at my Twitter feed. About a year ago, I developed some akathisia, and it looked as if I was playing footsies with my colleagues in meetings, so I had an urge to move. A quick email explaining that I was now going to sit on a bench where I could swing my legs or sit at the corner of the table was all that was needed, so I could move freely. No questions asked, and that is now settled after a medication reduction. So the 8th thing that Parkinson's has taught me is that it's about identity, but it's also about changing culture. So within the NHS, I'm constantly raising awareness of Parkinson's patients getting their medications on time in hospital. This has been reinforced by encouraging people to wear a Team Parkinson's blue brain badge on their lanyard, and you can see that in the picture on the left. This is important for a person with Parkinson's because I recently had to attend my own emergency department with an unrelated Parkinson's complaint. The nurse looking after me had the blue brain badge on her lanyard, and it was reassuring to see. What Parkinson's medication are you on? When was your last dose? When is your next one? And do you have them with you? She said. The fact that patients with Parkinson's in hospital in England and Wales in 2019 spent an extra 28,500 extra nights in hospital due to a delay in their medications is not good care. We've made some great steps forward, but we need to improve. So if anybody wants to have a blue brain badge on their lanyard in the UK or elsewhere, you just Google Team Parkinson's, fill out the form, and they will send you one. So the journey continues. We all walk on. On preparing this, I never realized I get the chance as a person with Parkinson's to say thank you for all the research that goes on a daily basis, people pushing the boundaries of science as we learn more and more every day about this complex disease. And that's the ninth thing that I've learned about Parkinson's, is that we have to keep going. So if you're listening tonight and you're a researcher, just can I encourage you to keep going, to keep pushing the boundaries in the field, keep asking the question why, and if you don't know the answer, try to find a way. So what is my hope? Well, my hope is that one day there will be a disease-modifying medication and even a cure. My hope is that patients in hospital do get their Parkinson's medications on time. My hope is that this horrendous condition can be diagnosed earlier so people can get on disease-modifying medications when they're discovered, or in the interim, keep exercising and stay fit and healthy until it does. My hope is that the Parkinson's community kick apathy into touch, combine and become one voice. And there's one organisation that does that presently, and that's the PMD Avengers. So I don't know how many people listening are PMD Avengers, but if you want more information, go to www.pdavengers.com. When will those disease-modifying medications be discovered? In our time? Possibly. But if not, the foundations will have been set for the ones walking behind. And that day will be someday. So let me finish by asking this question. What do you see? Do you see this image from 1886 of a frail older man with advanced Parkinson's who has a hunched posture and is shaking? Or maybe these images from Armstrong and Oaken from the University of Florida that were recently published last year. One is of a younger woman who's running with signs of mild Parkinson's disease. One is of a middle-aged man depicting motor fluctuations. And the final one is an updated image of the 1886 one, again depicting a frail older man using a walking aid. Or maybe you see this, an image that I recently sketched, which is modern, gender neutral, race neutral, an image that is ageless, one that truly pictures Parkinson's, one that widely educates, and most importantly, when a person with Parkinson's looks at it, they can see some of themselves in it. Or maybe you see this, the flip side of the modern sketch, focusing on management. If you implement everything on this slide, then you give yourself, I think, a better chance of living better every day with Parkinson's. And that, I was asked to draw that by two clinicians in the UK, Dr. Rob Skelly and Dr. Fiona Lindup, who work up in Derby. And they've written a book called Parkinson's Disease and Interdisciplinary Guide to Management, which goes through all those things, which is out in October, but you can pre-order on Amazon at the minute. So the 10th and final thing that Parkinson's has taught me is that you need to be yourself. There's only one of you. You're unique, and you have so much to give. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was amazing. Really amazing. Very touching, and some beautiful, beautiful comments here for you, Jonny. David writes, it's the best PMD Alliance talk ever. Needs an award. Thank you, Jonny. Somebody writes, standing ovation. I signed up and made my whole family sign up for the Avengers. So many comments here. Some great sort of just, this is an excellent talk. They love your accent. You sound like John Lennon, apparently.
I'm not saying.
And yeah, I mean, just a lot of great comments. So so thank you so much for putting that amazing talk together, and the sketches are just beautiful. One of the things that people have asked about is whether you've always been this artistic and drawn, or is this a new thing?
Well, I always drew as a child, so I was always sort of drawn in the house and stuff. But when I went to university, I sort of forgot about it. I didn't really draw a lot, and then you get work, and you get into work, and sort of just goes out the window. So it was really only 2 years after I was diagnosed that I picked up the pencil again, and I think the ideas came. I think it was easier to draw in a sense. The ideas of what to draw and how to draw came very naturally in a sense. In the past, I always had to draw from. I had to copy a picture, whereas now I can just do it from the way I want to, which is a change. But I really can't do much apart from draw things around letters. I don't know why. It's bizarre.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Beautiful though, absolutely brilliant. And I love, I think the concept of that old drawing with the hunched, over old man has really done a disservice to being able to even educate people and open their minds to the fact that, younger, people of color, women, anyone can get it really. It's sort of one of these things where I think that drawing has sort of set us back in the educational sort of sphere tremendously, because even in medical school, we see those drawings and then we think that's who presents, right? So so much of what we have to do is re-educate, and I think this type of talk is just foundational for that type of thing. So amazing. People have brought up the sort of concept of your honesty with your children. Was that sort of just a very natural flow from your family dynamic? What would you advise people who are trying to grapple with that, sort of when to tell the children, and kind of how that decision was made by you?
Yeah, I mean, we were quite open about it. I think things hadn't been right in the house for about 6 or 9 months before diagnosis. My in-laws had come over and they hadn't seen me for about a year, and they'd sort of said, what's wrong with him? What's the matter with him? He's not himself. What is it? And nobody could really put their finger on it. So they had noticed. The kids obviously noticed as well. There was nothing obvious to notice physically, but it just wasn't there. My wife used to say I was on a different planet. It was like just here but not here, if you know what I mean. So we sort of try to explain it to them, not in any great detail, but my son didn't really ask a lot about it. My daughter would ask questions whenever she was going to sleep at night. She'd lift her head off the pillow and she'd say things like, what's caused it? Are you going to die? Things like that. And I think that probably went on for maybe 2.5 years, and now it's rarely mentioned. We just get on with it. You know what I mean? It's there, but it's not really talked about to a major degree. They'll notice. If I'm off, or if I'm not swinging my arm, or if I'm tripped a bit. But they don't inquire about it as such. So it's just become normal in a sense.
Yeah. And what about the decision to involve the people at work and bring them into learning about the diagnosis and things?
Yeah, so that was difficult. I think I kept it really quite tightly knit to start with. So it was just my consultant colleagues. So it was 12 of them. So I just told them. And they've been really good at support and just helping. I think my head of service, my boss, he spent a lot of time listening, and I think he understands Parkinson's more than my other colleagues. So he knows what makes me tick, and he knows what stresses me out, and he knows what's too far and what's not. And he gives it to me in like little nuggets. So it's like, do this, and then it's like, do this, and then you've done that, and then do this. So it's not you have to do this. You do have to do this, but it's like he shows me little bits along the way. So he sort of guides me in a sense. The nurses, I had to tell the nurses one day, because I was I was still not medicated, and everybody was asking me why I was limping up the board. what had happened to my leg. And, you know, obviously I wasn't working after 6 o'clock. I wasn't on call. So everybody was just, I didn't want people to go, what's the matter with him? You know, why is he not doing on call? Why is he not working after 6 o'clock? What's wrong with him? So I thought it was much easier to just tell people that what the diagnosis was, to, you know, be open about it so people wouldn't gossip in a sense.
Sure. And I guess there's a balance, as, you know, being in the healthcare profession, you know, myself, I think many doctors are honestly terrible patients, right? Many of us don't take care of ourselves. We're like the last one to really go see the doctor and then follow the doctor's advice sometimes. And so, you know, there's sort of that balance, but it sounds like you have a really nice sort of, like you mentioned, the group, the support network that you created, which includes your neurologist. And so I think that's really, you know, smart to kind of, you know, work closely with, it sounds like, your workplace to figure out sort of if there's modifications that need to be in place. And then, you know, sort of keeping everyone informed from your boss sort of down so that you're not hiding things. And so everyone can kind of work together. And then presumably it's a relatively small hospital, is it? Or were you looking?
Oh, no, it's so our emergency department is the third biggest in the world.
Wow. Okay.
So we can see, I think we see up to sort of 500, 600 patients a day. So it's huge.
Okay.
Big.
Okay.
I just work, it's like 6 departments split up all together. So I just work in one little part of it. So.
Okay. Wow. That sounds amazing. So great that you're able to have figured out how to kind of connect, because you presumably derive tremendous purpose and self-worth with what you're trained to do, right? So sort of, could you describe that sort of balance in your mind of sort of trying to keep that part of things going, but also, you know, being mindful of, you know, what is stressing you out? How does that work?
Well, I think routine's important. I think what COVID's basically taught us is that you know, when you change routine, it can unhinge you slightly. So routine's important, and I think part of that is work. You know, if I wasn't working, I don't know what particularly, you know, it would be a very difficult transition. You know, I know it's going to change at some point, and you know, I'll have to stop and whatever. But at the minute, it is good. It's routine. I'm in a good routine. You know, the change in work in September, I think, has been a positive move. You know, I think it was just too busy across 2 different jobs, and I was trying to balance it. So that something had to give, and that's what gave. So I think it's just adaptation, sensible adaptation as you go along. You know, things change, and you know, people say to me, well, why still working? Why do you not just take ill health retirement? Well, because I don't know what I would do with myself. I'm trained to see patients, and that's what I do. And the thing is, you know, I can still add value. You know, there's still patients that come in to our ward that, you know, something has been picked up, or, you know, that they're in for observation. You see them the next morning, and you've still, you know, at the end of the day, I've still 25 years experience of being an emergency room doctor. That doesn't disappear after just because you've been diagnosed with Parkinson's. And the other thing that's really interesting is that I thought when I was diagnosed, I would move away from the clinical work into more administration roles, but actually the reverse has happened. I'm doing more clinical work now than I was before I was diagnosed. And I think the reason for that is that it's in my brain, you know, and that's how I've been trained, that I know how to do that. You know, even though it's slower in a sense, it's still in there, and you know, Parkinson's hasn't taken that away. So I'll just continue to do that until somebody tells me that I can't.
Sure. No, I think that's right. I think we are imprinted. Some of this stuff is just, you know, natural. It comes as natural as probably, you know, certain things in other jobs, like cutting food for a chef or something like that. I think certain things are definitely imprinted. And I think you have a lot to give. I mean, I think, you know, the perspective that you bring now as somebody who is living with Parkinson's, you know, is like the advocacy work that you're doing with the timing. Walter's asking, what was the stat about extra nights in the hospital for people with Parkinson's? That's how to move the needle with hospital admin, that it would save them time and money to give the meds on time. So you actually did a survey to see how many extra days people had to stay because they got their medications off schedule.
Yeah. So that was from Parkinson's UK survey last year that came out through NHS data. But yeah, 20 patients in 2019 England and Wales because they didn't get their medications on time in hospital, they spent an extra 20,500 extra nights in hospital in 1 year, which costs, I think it costs about £10 million to the NHS. So, if you look at what Leeds have done, they've implemented a Parkinson's medication bundle, which is a whole hospital approach. And basically they've reduced their length of stay down. It reduces cost, and if the patients get their medication on time, they have a chance to rehabilitate, they have a chance to get home, and it's cost effective. But that message doesn't get through, and the reason is there's no money attached to it. There's no target. What needs to happen if governments or health service chiefs want to improve Parkinson's care, they need to somehow apply a tariff or to Parkinson's patients getting their medications on time, because it's not a priority. It hasn't been, and it needs to be, and that's the only way that it's going to happen.
Absolutely. I think that, and I love the fact that you've connected also with these other clinicians that are in the UK and Wales. What does that group, why do you think that it resonates so much with the 15 of you? Is it that only you guys know what the sort of real barriers are in the healthcare system, or only you guys understand each other because you're all in medicine and what the purpose of your work brings? Yeah. What sort of connects you?
Yeah, so it's not just doctors. So within the group, we've got a paramedic, we've got a couple of midwives, there's doctors, there's radiographers, there's managers. So I think what connects us is that we range from sort of 39 to 58. So there is a reasonable age range. But as I said in the talk, whenever you get diagnosed with Parkinson's, suddenly you have something in common with everybody who has had a diagnosis of Parkinson's, or somebody who's caring for somebody with Parkinson's. But I think what's been useful with the group is that nobody understands what it's like for me in the health service to live and work with Parkinson's, whereas these guys do. So the radiographer understands, the nurse understands, they get it. They've had a rubbish day, they know they've been working 12-hour shifts, they haven't got their break, their meds are late, they understand that. And I think there is scope, I think, within the Parkinson's community for, I was saying to somebody the other day, the teachers, there's bound to be loads of teachers out there who are still teaching who've got Parkinson's. They should all connect together, and that they have something else in common. If there's people who are in the finance, work in finance and Parkinson's, they can connect together. People who work in the emergency services, police, firemen with Parkinson's, women. There's a whole range of support groups out there that could add something more to the support that people already have. Now that's talking directly to the working community, but we have a few people in the group who have retired recently, so they worked in the health service, so they're going to be they have really good advice for us whenever we have to make the transition from working to not working, and what happened, how it worked with the whole NHS pension, and what life was like on the other side. So some of them are having a good time. So they've made the transition really well, and I think that's helpful. That's helpful for the group.
Yeah. No, I think that those commonalities are great, and connecting socially is great, especially in the pandemic. And I think many of the things that you sort of talked about with getting a bit derailed with exercise, in the last few months, and even the sleep, I think many of us are feeling that regardless of, not having a diagnosis, just part of the pandemic and having kids. A lot of the things that you've said have really resonated with the group. Andrea and her team will send you all of these beautiful comments. They're actually very, very sweet. I mean, people are crying, tears of joy for your, amazing standing ovation. One comment is talking about using these graphics for a book for somebody who might be newly diagnosed, to really kind of give them sort of a sense, especially the sort of more modern ones. I think those are really lovely. I absolutely love those ones. Someone writes here, your children are my grandchildren's age. I hadn't thought of doing anything but shielding them from Parkinson's. So I think sort of the notion of, and I've noticed that too in patients who try to hide the disease, or there's a secret, and they're sort of not able to let their even own family in. I feel like it's a much bigger sort of stress to bear. And as you mentioned beautifully, the stress can really affect you, hiding your emotions, and trying to keep it all in can kind of make you stressed. That can affect your body in different ways. And so I think, I think your message of trying to be open, communicate well, let people in, is really, I think, one that I really resonate with, and I think is what the advice that I try to give. But we, of course, everyone's very different, when they're approaching, the people that are around them. So amazing sort of things. So one other question I had was around, it says, imagine your art raising tons of money for research. And I love the sort of talk that around the research and kind of giving continued inspiration for those folks, because they are so important, everyone working together as a team worldwide to sort of change this disease from, the diagnosis and to, sort of finding a cure, absolutely key. So what would you change now that you have a sense of the healthcare system? And I think you're largely based in the national health system, which has, this nurse specialist as an added kind of piece. If you could kind of revamp things and maybe relook at sort of the way that you were even given the diagnosis, and I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but I know, we're sort of as doctors trying to think about this a little bit differerently. How would you, if I gave you, let's say $1 million, what would you start, or £1 million, what would you do, Jonny?
What would I do? Yeah. I mean, it's very patient specific, isn't it? It's very, individual specific how the diagnosis is given. I think it's such a shock when you get the diagnosis that I think it's very difficult at that time to take anything in. I mean, I just stood in the car park and just couldn't believe it. They could have counseled me for 2 hours and I wouldn't really take any of it in. So I think I need to bear that in mind as what people are told. But I do think, there needs to be a bit more emphasis around, exercising, how you can live better each day in a sense at diagnosis. I mean, I think the sort of phrases about you've got 5 years, that's not helpful. That's not helpful at all. That needs to change. I think if I had £1 million, I would, I think there needs to be more interdisciplinary working at clinic. So I think if you take, I think Parkinson's patients would benefit so much more if there was a joint clinic between primary care, a movement disorder, and psychiatry. I think those three together, with a Parkinson's nurse, if somehow you could organise psychiatry with a movement disorder and a Parkinson's nurse and your GP, not all necessarily together, but all within that one service. And then you would have your dietitian, your physio, your OT, your speech and language, your psychologist, all working together. And I think people need they need a personalized Parkinson's plan. I call it a PPP, a personalized Parkinson's plan. Nobody's the same. There's 40 symptoms. Not everybody's. One person with Parkinson's, one person. The disease is so complex. What works for one person doesn't work for everybody else. And I think people need to have personalized plans, and that needs to be prescribed. I should be going to my appointment in 3 months, and people should be saying to me, what exercise are you doing? What have you done? Show me what you've done. What are you eating? Show me what you're eating. What are you doing? How's it compulsively? That all needs to be documented, and sometimes it's not. I think that the movement disorder services are very much around movement disorders, and everybody's got their little bit, don't they? But it's taking the holistic view of the patient, and I think people have a if you keep a diary, if you keep some way of tracking your symptoms, if you keep if you're able to go into your appointment, and I've used a word cloud, so you can go online and you can basically find a word cloud for free. You just type in what symptoms you've got, you rank them out of 10, which one's bothering you at the minute, and the first thing I do is I've handed it to a neurologist at the clinic, and it gives them an overview very quickly of where you're at. But yeah, £1 million would make a bit of an inroad, but obviously it needs to be a nationalised roadmap for Parkinson's for the UK and for around the world.
Yeah.
But that's what I would do.
Yeah. Well, that's great insight. I mean, I think that the sort of sense that you're going to be able to tell your movement disorder specialist who's specializing largely, I mean, the word movement disorder almost makes it seem like you're supposed to tell them only about your tremor or your bowel movement sometimes, but there's not a lot of the other non-motor things that kind of are included in that, right? And so the apathy and all these other things end up sort of falling by the wayside sometimes, just because people don't even know what's related to Parkinson's. So I think the education that you're talking about and helping people to see that sort of figure with all the different things from the head down is really helpful. And the interdisciplinary, like everyone working together. But I think you've also brought up the sort of potential for other sorts of folks to be aligned. So you have what sounds like almost like a peer mentoring program that's kind of forming with this Facebook group or WhatsApp group or whatever, where people who are a little bit more farther along in the stages, maybe kind of helping other people who are going through these transitions in their employment through. So I think, everyone sort of finding ways to connect and realign with each other is definitely, I think, so important. So I think we have to kind of think outside the box a little bit. And with a pandemic now, I think with these sorts of ways that we can have you here with us and see us, and we can make this video available and other people can watch it, we can share it around. Hopefully we can get a little bit more of these out of the box sort of thoughts happening, as there are worldwide so many people in business, so many people in medicine that can all kind of be sort of brainstorming as to how to make things better. I think the sort of old picture of Parkinson's from whatever was it, 1862, or I can't remember, 1886. Yeah. And then the old sort of antiquated healthcare system, I think, where the doctor is sitting in a room and you come and see them once in 6 months for 15 minutes is also probably as the only point of care not very helpful either. But thank you so much for this amazing talk and your hard work with all the illustrations. It was so beautifully well done, and I think this talk will be a resource and shared I think by many, and people are saying that they're going to watch it over and over to get more out of it. I want to give you the last 3-4 minutes just to kind of give us some messages of hope, and any last couple of, you said I think 10 tips, and we can kind of link your talk and share them in whatever way you can. If you have any other sorts of things like the the information around the giving medicines on time, any of that stuff we can link with this talk. But maybe just give us a few last kind of messages of hope or a tip or two before we leave you.
Put me on the spot. I mean, I think I'm no expert. I'm just sort of telling as what I found over the past 5 years. I think my take-home message would be, do what you can to help yourself. Okay, so there's days I get up and I know I need to do some exercise. I know I should drink more than I do to keep myself hydrated, and there's some days I just don't. And if you can just get up and inside, just get that grit to basically do the basics right. Do what you can, or to help as much as you can. That's important. I do think listen to other people. Your care partner who you're with, and that close knit unit that you've got. It's always. Time's not wasted by talking, and if you're feeling something inside, just get it out, and it's better out in the open than trying to not talk about it. So just get it out in the open, and you feel a lot better. And then just have something in the diary, have something to look forward to. That's really important. And if we did that every day, doing the basics right, having a chat, and looking forward to something, it's not rocket science. It's something that that hopefully will help help you.
I love that. That's like so easy, right? So I think the basics of the wellness, so sleep, eating right, hydration, all the things that are going to set a platform for you to succeed for the day. So starting off, if you as best you can, and then having at the end of the day something or somewhere in there something to look forward to is so key, because I think we all need a reason, a purpose to live, and maybe looking forward to having a social drink with a friend or something on happy hour, or walk with somebody at the end of the day, or your favorite football match, I think is amazing. And then I love the piece about communicating and opening up, because I think people feel that this is a secret. They keep it to themselves, they isolate, they get in a corner, and they kind of paint themselves more and more in a corner. And I think ultimately so much of what I've been trying to spend the last year doing is figuring out how to help people connect. And I think as a spokesperson for somebody in medicine who is, a man, who, you wouldn't think that would be something that would come out of, your mouth, as sort of one of the real secrets to success, is the sort of communication involving people and getting it off your chest. So I really applaud you for saying that. I mean, I think that takes a lot, because as doctors, we often aren't those people, right? We keep it all, we can't share this, and, we're infallible. And I think that hearing that from you hopefully will give permission and hope to others to do the same. And I think it can really be transformative. So people can't help you unless they know what you're doing, right? So and a lot of the issues are not obvious, as the motor issues are somewhat obvious, tremor and things, but those are often not the things that bother people the most. And so the quiet unheard voices and the hidden faces are really what people are dealing with. And so communicating, absolutely. So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing the time. I know it's late there, and I really appreciate you putting this beautiful talk together, and we will definitely try to get it out to as many people as possible. Thank you, Jonny, for joining us, and happy International Women's Day, everyone, to all the ladies out there. And thanks again to the PMD Alliance for hosting. I will hand it back to Andrea to give us a goodbye wave.
Yes, we always close by showing our gratitude for our speakers and for Dr. Subramanian and each other and all this great discussion with a gratitude wave. So I invite you to turn on your camera for some eye contact across the airwaves. Thank you to everyone, and thank you, Jonny, for coming and sharing with us today. It was wonderful.
Bye.